In a quiet corner of the galaxy, far from the shining heart of the Council worlds, the planet Velor 7 spun slowly under a darkening sky, its two suns casting long shadows across wide plains and silver cities. For centuries, Velor 7 had known peace, its people advanced but peaceful, relying on the protection of the Galactic Council to keep threats far away. But now, as strange energy readings flashed across their planetary sensors and orbiting satellites blinked offline, the truth became clear. Something was coming, and it wasn't friendly. In underground command centers, Valorian scientists and military leaders watched in silence as a vast swarm of ships broke from hyperspace near their outer moon. Dark, jagged vessels that moved like a tide of blades, cutting through the void with terrifying speed. The enemy had a name feared across scattered legends: the Karnath Swarm, an ancient species of insectoid conquerors that had not been seen in over 1,000 years, once thought extinct, now returning in numbers no one had ever imagined. The Valorians, unprepared for full-scale war, scrambled to activate ancient defense platforms and call for help. But their planetary communications relay had been damaged during a power surge, and the only backup system available was a long-forgotten, deep-range beacon that hadn't been used in decades, barely functional, its controls flickering with static. With no other choice, the High Minister authorized the emergency signal, and the beacon lit up, broadcasting a single message in Old Council code: under attack, need immediate aid. The message was meant for the core worlds, the heart of the galaxy's defense network, but the signal was weak, distorted, and bounced across outdated relays in random directions, slipping through anomalies and outdated jump nodes until it landed somewhere no one had expected. A quiet listening post orbiting Pluto, long believed to be obsolete by most of Earth's citizens, maintained only by a small team of AI systems and a handful of watch officers stationed in what they called the graveyard shift. Officer Jonah Reese, a young communications tech barely 2 months into his assignment, was sipping cold coffee when the alarm sounded, a shrill tone that hadn't been heard in over 80 years. He nearly spilled his drink as red lights flashed, and the console lit up with alien symbols that the station system couldn't immediately translate. With a mixture of fear and curiosity, Jonah called it in, and within 6 hours, the signal reached United Terran Command on Earth, where it was decrypted by a quantum AI system and played for a room full of high-ranking officials. 5 words, broken and static-filled but unmistakable: under attack, need immediate aid. At first, the officials debated whether it was a prank, a lost echo from some ancient battle, or perhaps even a trap. But when telescopes and sensor arrays pointed toward Velor 7, the truth became impossible to ignore. The planet was surrounded, its orbit choked with foreign vessels, and no known Council forces nearby to assist. Earth had grown cautious in recent years, less involved with galactic affairs, tired of politics and ignored by the Council despite its rapid technological rise. But something about the message struck a nerve. Earth remembered what it was like to be ignored, to call out for help in the dark, and hear only silence. It remembered its early days in the stars, when human explorers had to fight tooth and nail to earn respect from older species that saw them as primitive. The call for aid triggered something deeper than strategy. It touched pride, pain, and a deep-seated resolve that humanity had earned through centuries of war, rebuilding, and survival. That same day, the United Terran Senate was called into emergency session, and after a heated debate that lasted less than 3 hours, the vote passed. Earth would answer the call. Within 12 hours, Admiral Diana Cortez, a decorated fleet commander who had retired after the Orion conflict, was pulled from quiet life in the Alps and flown by hypersonic jet to Lunar Command, where she was briefed, recommissioned, and placed in charge of a newly formed battle group. 72 warships, including dreadnoughts, cruisers, support vessels, stealth corvettes, and the flagship Dauntless, Earth's most advanced ship. The mission was simple: reach Velor 7, assess the threat, and if possible, save the planet. Cortez, stern and quiet, accepted the orders without ceremony, her face calm as stone but her eyes burning with purpose. As the fleet prepared for launch, millions of people across Earth watched in silence. News feeds lit up with the words, "Unknown planet in danger. Earth answers." The launch was fast and silent. No speeches, no flags, just the distant roar of fusion drives as the fleet jumped into fold space, tearing through the fabric of space-time with ghostly blue trails. The journey to Velour 7 took 4 days in hyperspace, during which Cortez studied every report, every intercepted image, every scrap of data. The enemy ships were unlike any Earth had ever seen, insect-like with biometallic plating and energy signatures that made no sense. The fleet's AI, a calm and ancient voice named Argus, advised caution, but Cortez had already made her decision. If the Carnath had truly returned, then Velour 7 was just the first target. As the Dauntless neared real space, the crew fell, silent, bracing for whatever waited. Then, with a soft hum and a jolt, the fleet dropped into orbit over Velour 7, and the sight that greeted them was worse than expected. The sky was burning. Alien ships swarmed above the planet like a cloud of locusts, targeting defense platforms, blasting orbital stations, and launching pods toward the surface. The Valorians had no time to welcome their saviors. The moment the humans arrived, they were already in the fight. Cortez stood on the command deck of the Dauntless, eyes scanning the chaotic display as explosions bloomed in the distance and red markers filled the tactical grid. She didn't hesitate. "All ships," she said calmly. "Engage and defend, no mercy." And with that, Earth answered. Plasma cannons lit the darkness. Railguns fired from kilometers away. Squadrons of human pilots, trained for deep space combat, dove into battle against creatures they had never seen before. The Carnath, caught by surprise, scrambled to respond, but human tactics were unpredictable, fast, and relentless. For the first time in decades, the stars echoed with Earth's fury. On the surface of Velour 7, citizens watched in awe as the invaders pulled back from orbit, confused and pressured by this sudden new force. The High Minister, still shocked, asked who these people were. No one knew. No name, no message, no warning. Just ships with a blue and white emblem, a circle of stars surrounding one world, Earth. The battle was far from over, but in that moment, a seed of hope took root. Not just in Velour 7, but in a galaxy that had long forgotten what humanity was capable of. Because the call had been sent by mistake. But Earth had heard it, and Earth had come. The sky above Velour 7 burned with fire and metal as the Terran fleet tore through the blackness of space, their arrival like a thunderclap that shattered the Carnath formation in orbit, and for a few seconds, even the fearless insect-like enemy seemed unsure, thrown off by the sudden appearance of 72 sleek armed warships moving in perfect unity. The human flagship Dauntless led the charge, its dark hull glowing with reactor heat as it fired a triple blast from its forward railguns, sending metal slugs through the void faster than sound, piercing the carapace of a Carnath dreadbeast ship and splitting it in half with one strike. Dozens of Earth fighter squadrons swarmed out like angry wasps, moving with impossible speed and precision, their movements guided by both human instinct and AI-assisted combat patterns, weaving between enemy fire to launch missiles and plasma bursts at vital targets. Inside the Valorian capital, citizens stood frozen, eyes turned to the heavens, watching streaks of blue and red fire dance above the clouds, and for the first time since the invasion began, the fear that gripped them loosened, replaced with something they had nearly forgotten: awe. The Carnath, stunned by the human assault, tried to regroup, but they were not used to resistance this fierce, and their war tactics, built on overwhelming numbers, began to falter as the humans pushed forward with coordinated attacks that focused on critical weak points. On board the Dauntless, Admiral Cortez never raised her voice, standing calm and still in the center of the command deck, her eyes focused on the battle holograms, giving short, clear orders that moved entire squadrons like pieces on a chessboard. "Sector 3, collapse the flank, push them into the ion field," she said, and moments later, a group of human corvettes baited enemy ships into a trap where EMP blasts disabled them, leaving them helpless as Terran drones finished the job. No words were exchanged between the two sides. No introduction, no warning, no demand. Just a silent storm of fire and steel that told the Karnath exactly who had arrived. On the surface, Valorian leaders tried to contact the new arrivals, sending out hails in multiple frequencies. But the Terrans didn't respond, not yet. They had a war to win first. The enemy began to retreat, pulling back from orbital positions, but the humans didn't let them go, chasing the retreating. Swarm with relentless fury, determined to drive them away or destroy them completely. Valorian defense commanders, monitoring the battle, stared at the screens with disbelief as the Karnath, once thought unstoppable, were forced to fall back, not by the Council, not by ancient allies, but by a species that hadn't even been a council member in over a decade. Below the surface, in a fortified command center, High Minister Kalis turned to her science advisor with a stunned expression. "Who are they?" she whispered, as if afraid to say the words aloud. I think they're human," the advisor replied, eyes wide. "From Earth." The name stirred half-remembered memories in Valorian history, a once ambitious species. Fast learners, unpredictable, brave to the point of madness, and forgotten by most of the galaxy. But now, they were here, and they were not the same as before. Their ships moved like they had trained for this moment all their lives, and their weapons were far beyond what Valorians had expected from an outer world species. In orbit, the battle reached its peak. A Karnath Queen ship shaped like a massive hornet charged directly toward the Dauntless, launching a swarm of acid drones and beam turrets in a suicide run. Cortez watched its approach and gave a single command: Omega pattern. Burn it. The Dauntless responded with full thrust, flipping its orientation while charging its main cannon, and in one blinding moment, a white-hot beam of focused energy lanced out and punched through the Queen ship, slicing it cleanly down the middle. The explosion that followed lit up the battlefield and sent dozens of smaller enemy ships spiraling out of control. The humans pressed the advantage, sweeping through the remains of the swarm with brutal precision. In less than 2 hours, the sky above Velor 7 was cleared. Wreckage floated in orbit, glowing with residual energy, and the once proud Karnath swarm was either destroyed, scattered, or in full retreat. A strange silence fell over the world, the kind that comes after a violent storm. Then, for the first time, Earth opened a channel. The transmission was brief, a single voice, calm and professional. "This is Admiral Diana Cortez of the United Terran Fleet. We received your distress call. We're here to help. No demand for recognition, no condition, just a statement, clear, simple, and final. Velor 7, a planet on the edge of extinction, had been saved not by the mighty Council, not by some ancient ally, but by humanity, a species once cast aside, now returned with firepower and fearlessness the galaxy had nearly forgotten. But deep, in space, far beyond the edges of Velor 7, the Karnath weren't done. The retreat was only part of a larger plan, and hidden among the wreckage of battle, a damaged Karnath drone pulsed with a silent signal, sending data to a hive deep in unknown space. The humans had won the battle, but the war had only just begun. The stars over Velor 7 were quiet again, but the silence felt fragile, like glass that could shatter at any moment. And while the people on the ground celebrated their survival, Admiral Diana Cortez stood in the command center of the Dauntless, with her arms folded and her eyes locked on the tactical display, knowing this was not the end. It was only a pause. Wreckage drifted outside the ship, pieces of broken Karnath vessels still glowing from the fierce firestorm of battle, and though the enemy had fled, they had done so in a pattern too controlled, too focused, like they had achieved something, even in defeat. Cortez didn't trust it. On the surface, the Valorians sent a formal request to meet the human commander, and for the first time since the battle, the humans responded. A dropship touched down on the Valorian capital's skyport under full escort, and from it, Admiral Cortez stepped out in her black fleet uniform, flanked by Terran guards with silver armor and calm expressions, their presence causing silence. Across the crowd gathered to greet them. High Minister Kalis approached slowly, unsure whether to bow, salute, or speak first, until Cortez broke the tension with a short nod. You called for help, she said. We answered. Kalis, overwhelmed by the directness, could only nod in return, then finally said, You saved us. We owe you everything. Cortez glanced up at the smoke trails in the sky and replied, We don't do it for thanks. We do it because we know what it's like to be alone. They walked together into the city's central chamber, where Cortez was shown maps of the recent attacks, damage reports, and partial scans of Karnath movements. Something in the data caught her attention, a strange pattern in the swarm's final retreat route, a path that curved around Velor 7's moon before disappearing. She tapped the map. This isn't a retreat. This is a signal path, she muttered, then turned to her aide. Run a sweep of all deep space comms. I want to know if anything got out before we arrived. Back aboard the Dauntless, Argus, the ship's AI, confirmed her fear. A Karnath drone had activated a long-range signal burst just before the Queen ship was destroyed, and it was sent toward deep space, coordinates unknown. Cortez knew what it meant. The Karnath were calling reinforcements, or worse, warning the Hive. Time was short. She called an emergency council with her senior officers and the Valorian High Command. This world was never the real target, she said. It was a test to measure our response time, strength, and tactics. That drone sent everything back to them. Panic stirred in the Valorian ranks, but Cortez held up a hand. We can't run, and hiding won't help. The Karnath only understand strength. Kalis looked uncertain. Then what do we do? Cortez's voice was steady. We strike first. Gasps followed, but she continued. We track the signal. Trail. We think we can follow it. If we move now, we can hit their staging ground before they gather more forces. Some Valorian commanders objected, but Kalis stared at the human admiral, then slowly said, You saved us. We'll follow. Your lead. Cortez nodded once. Within hours, the Terran fleet was resupplied with fuel and repairs, while Velor 7 sent 2 of its best scout ships and a squadron of elite pilots to join them. It wasn't a large force, but it was enough for what Cortez had planned, a fast, precise strike, not a drawn-out battle. Before leaving, Cortez stood before a crowd of Valorian citizens gathered at the city's plaza. Earth remembers when no one came to help us, she said, her voice echoing through the square. This time we came, and now we strike not, just for Velor 7, but for every world the Karnath have ever tried to silence. The fleet left in a silent jump, vanishing into fold space like a shadow sliding across the stars. They followed the signal trail into a distant part of the galaxy, a system marked as uninhabited on all charts, hidden behind gravitational anomalies. What they found there was worse than expected. Floating in orbit around a dead planet was a Karnath hive ship, massive, covered in strange organic armor, pulsing with light. Hundreds of vessels swarmed around it, forming new battle formations. They were preparing for something big, and they had no idea the humans were coming. As the Terran fleet powered down and moved into silent approach, Cortez gave her officers a single order. We return the favor. And deep within the hive ship, the Karnath did not yet know that their hunters had arrived. And this time, humanity wasn't waiting to be asked. The fleet moved like ghosts through the cold shadows of deep space, silent and hidden, every ship running dark to avoid detection as they approached the dead system where the Karnath hive ship floated like a sleeping monster, massive and alive with movement, surrounded by hundreds of smaller vessels that shifted and swirled in strange patterns that didn't match any known war formation. Admiral Cortez stood on the bridge of the Dauntless, eyes locked on the tactical screen, watching the hive ship's strange pulses and listening to the soft voice of Argus as it whispered the latest scans. Energy spikes detected, unusual life form. Activity, movement below the surface of the hive, it said, and Cortez could feel it in her bones. Something was wrong. This wasn't just a fleet regrouping or preparing another attack. It was something else. The Valorian scouts had returned with more data, and their findings only deepened the mystery. The hive ship wasn't just a command vessel. It was changing, growing, feeding off the dead planet below, pulling materials from deep under the crust using long, root-like beams that drilled into the rock. Cortez studied the readings in silence, and then she saw it. Buried within the hollow planet's core was something strange, an artificial object, old and massive, unlike Karnath design. "That's not theirs," she said, pointing at the image. "They're here for that." The room went quiet as Argus enhanced the image. It was a massive sphere, hidden under layers of stone, carved with alien symbols that none of the languages in the Terran database could match. It wasn't a weapon, not exactly, but it radiated energy, enough to power 100 hive ships. Cortez turned to her officers. "They didn't attack Valor 7 to destroy it. They needed a distraction. They wanted us to look away while they dug this up." Her voice was calm, but the tension in the air grew heavy. "This is their real goal. Whatever this object is, they want it, and we have to stop them before they succeed." Plans were made quickly. The fleet would strike in 2 waves. The first wave would create a diversion, pulling the swarm away from the hive ship, while a second team led by Earth's best engineers and Valorian scientists would land on the dead planet and reach the object before the Karnath could extract it. But before Cortez gave the final order, Argus spoke again, its tone lower. "Warning. Intercepted transmissions reveal intent to activate object. Estimated time, less than 6 hours." The hive was not just harvesting. It was preparing to use the sphere, and no one knew what it would do. Cortez gave the order. "Initiate assault." In moments, the fleet burst into action. Ships powered up in silence, then jumped forward. In synchronized strikes, their weapons lighting up the dark system with sudden fury. The first wave crashed into the outer swarm like a hammer, drawing the attention of the smaller Karnath ships and luring them into a fierce dogfight away from the hive ship. Meanwhile, 3 dropships raced toward the dead planet, dodging stray fire and slipping through defensive gaps. Inside one of the dropships was Commander Elias Wren, a Terran ground leader known for daring missions and impossible odds. With him were engineers, scientists, and a few Valorian tech officers who had volunteered to help. As the dropship entered the planet's thin atmosphere, turbulence shook the cabin, but Wren stood firm, gripping the side rails. "Our job is simple," he said. "Get to the sphere, stop whatever they're doing, or none of us go home." The dropship landed hard near a crater edge, and the team rushed out, moving fast under cover as the sky above them glowed with flashes from the space battle overhead. Karnath drilling beams were already active, glowing green and piercing the planet's crust with eerie light. As they reached the dig site, strange shapes moved in the fog. Biomechanical guards, half insect and half machine, patrolling the area. The team used stealth and precision to disable the guards, moving deeper into the tunnels the Karnath had carved. And then they saw it. The sphere, larger than any building, humming with power, floating above a pit of strange alien stone, connected to the hive ship above by a glowing tether. One of the scientists, a Valorian named Tylan, gasped, "This isn't Karnath tech. It's older, much older." Before anyone could speak, a rumble shook the tunnel, and the sphere began to spin slowly, lights running across its surface like veins awakening. Argus confirmed it instantly. "Activation sequence begun. Time to unknown event. 20 minutes. Wren turned to the engineers. "Shut it down. Now." As they moved to the controls, the ground above shook again, and a new sound filled the air. A high-pitched chittering as Karnath warriors began pouring into the tunnels, alerted by the humans' presence. Wren raised his weapon and said one word, "Hold." And above them, Admiral Cortez watched the battle unfold from space, knowing that if the team failed, the entire system might be lost. Or worse, the Karnath would awaken something no one was ready to face. The tunnels beneath the dead planet trembled as Karnath warriors poured in like black waves, their limbs clacking against the stone, eyes glowing with hive light, while Commander Wren and his team fought to hold their ground near the ancient sphere, shouting commands over the roar of energy pulsing from the alien object that hovered at the center of the chamber, spinning faster with each passing moment. Sparks flew as the Terran engineers worked at the exposed panels, trying to trace alien circuits they didn't understand, guided only by instinct, guesswork, and the hurried advice of Valorian scientists who had never seen anything like this before. Wren fired another shot, his plasma rifle glowing hot, taking down a charging beast, but more came, and behind them, a low rumble echoed from deeper in the tunnels. Something larger was coming. Then, just as the situation grew desperate, the skies above the planet lit up with dozens of new warp signatures. And across the system, comms crackled with alerts as a fleet unlike any seen before dropped out of fold space. Ships long and silver, shaped like smooth spears and glowing with golden thrusters, lined up in formation. It was the Galactic Council. After decades of silence and delay, they had finally arrived, not in answer to Velour 7's cry, but because the energy signatures from the sphere had grown too powerful to ignore. At first, they didn't fire. They only observed, scanning the system and focusing their attention on the Terran fleet locked in combat with the Karnath. Then, without warning, a council ship hailed the Dauntless. Admiral Cortez accepted the signal, standing tall before the main screen as a shimmering figure appeared. A tall, pale being with silver eyes and a voice that seemed to echo inside the mind. "Human fleet," the being said. "You are not authorized to engage." Cortez frowned. "We didn't wait for permission. Velour 7 was burning. We responded." The council envoy narrowed his eyes. "You have interfered in matters beyond your reach. That object is under council watch now." But Cortez didn't flinch. "Too late. We found it. The Karnath are trying to activate it, and my people are down there risking their lives to stop it." Silence followed. Then another council ship, older and larger than the rest, moved forward, weapons glowing. The message was clear. Step back or be forced out. But the Dauntless didn't move. Meanwhile, on the surface, the battle raged on. Ren's team had finally cracked a control panel on the sphere, and Tylan, the Valorian scientist, called out, "I think I found a way to delay the activation, maybe even shut it down, but I need time." Ren nodded, turning to hold the tunnel as more Karnath came through, his ammo running low, his armor scorched. "Then take it," he said, voice calm. "We'll hold." Outside, the Terran fleet repositioned, placing themselves between the Council and the Hive ship, not threatening, but firm. Cortez opened a system-wide channel. "To all vessels, humanity will not step aside while the Karnath awaken something we don't understand. If you want us gone, you'll have to push through us." For a moment, the Council ships held position, uncertain. This was not the humanity they remembered. Weak, desperate, begging to join the galaxy's elite. This was a force that acted without asking, one that stood its ground. Then a new voice came through, deeper, older. A second envoy appeared on screen, an elder of the Ilari, one of the Council's founding species. "Admiral Cortez," he said, "the sphere below is a remnant from the First War, a weapon buried long ago. If the Karnath activate it, it may tear open the void itself." Cortez nodded. "Then help us stop them." The elder paused, then gave a slow nod. "Very well, the Council will assist, but you take responsibility for this battle." "Gladly," she replied. At once Council ships joined the fight, targeting the Karnath swarm still circling the Hive ship. With combined firepower, the tide shifted fast. Below, the tunnels shook again, and the ground cracked as a giant Karnath brute burst through. Roaring, but Ren and his last few soldiers stood firm, giving Tylan the final seconds he needed. "I've got it!" the scientist shouted. "The sequence is locked. It won't activate." The sphere dimmed, its glow fading. The tether connecting it to the Hive ship snapped, and a pulse of harmless energy burst out like a silent sigh of relief. Above, the Hive ship reeled, as if wounded, and the swarm fell into disarray. The battle was over. Humanity had held the line. The Council had finally joined the fight. But now, everyone had seen the truth. The Karnath weren't just conquerors. They were looking for something, and whatever lay beneath the surface of that dead world, it wasn't the only one. The battlefield hung in silence as the last Karnath ships scattered into the dark, their Hive ship drifting powerless in orbit, while Council and Terran vessels circled the broken system, uneasy allies bound by a danger none of them yet understood. Deep below the surface, the alien sphere remained dark and lifeless, but something in the air still felt wrong, as if the danger had not truly passed. Admiral Cortez stood once more on the bridge of the Dauntless, her face lit by the soft blue light of the tactical screens, reviewing new data feeds with a sharp eye. Argus had begun decoding the strange signals once emitted by the sphere before Tylan locked it down, and now a new pattern was emerging, not a message, but a map. The object had been transmitting coordinates, and those coordinates pointed far beyond Council space, deep into a sector long believed empty, marked only by old warnings and forgotten debris. The location was a dead system known to the oldest races as Sector Null, where long ago something terrible had happened, though no records remained of what. Cortez knew it wasn't over. The Karnath had been trying to reach something there, and the disabled hive ship was the key. While Council engineers argued about what to do with the ancient device, Cortez took action. She ordered her own team to board the hive ship while it was still weak, hoping to find clues inside. Commander Wren, barely recovered from the fight, on the planet led the boarding party, his armor still scarred, his team silent as they entered the hive's twisted corridors. Inside, the ship was alive, pulsing with faint bioenergy, walls made of strange tissue that flexed like muscle. The deeper they went, the more they realized the ship wasn't just alive, it was growing. "This thing's rebuilding itself," one Marine whispered, eyes wide. Wren stayed focused, pushing forward until they reached what looked like a central chamber. Inside, they found a structure pulsing with light, a gate shaped like a massive ring, covered in the same symbols seen on the sphere. Argus confirmed. It from orbit. The hive ship wasn't just a vessel, it was a relay. The gate inside was ancient tech, hidden beneath layers of Karnath growth, and it had been drawing power from the sphere. They weren't just waking it up, Cortez realized. They were trying to open something. She stared at the gate's pattern as Argus translated the symbols. The message was short, chilling, and direct. First gate, path to the core. A chill ran through her. The Karnath hadn't built the sphere or the gate. They had found them, just like humanity had. They were trying to follow a trail, and the first stop had almost been their victory. Cortez called the council commanders into a private channel and shared what her teams had found. At first, they didn't believe it, but the data was clear, and the gate's structure matched no known technology. The Alari elder, his voice tight with concern, spoke slowly. "There are old stories of weapons buried by those who came before. Tools meant to end wars so terrible they were erased from memory. We thought they were myths, but now I am not sure." Cortez didn't wait. "We need to go to Sector Null. If the Karnath are heading there, we can't let them reach it first." The council hesitated, their pride still bruised from being outpaced by humanity, but finally they agreed. The fleet split, half to remain behind and study the sphere and gate, the other half to follow the coordinates. Within hours they were in motion. As the combined force jumped into fold space, Argus detected a faint signal from deep inside the gate. A pulse, like a heartbeat, that hadn't stopped even after the power source was severed. "It's still connected," Argus said. "Something on the other side is awake." The words hung in the air like smoke. Days later, the fleet emerged into Sector Null, a graveyard of shattered planets and floating wrecks. Black holes marked the outer edges, and strange static blocked most scans. But in the center, floating in silence, was a ring 10 times larger than the hive ship gate. A colossal structure pulsing faintly, ancient and terrible. It wasn't just a gate. It was a doorway to something else. A deeper place, unseen, untouched. Cortez stared at the image on her screen and spoke only 2 words. "The Swarm's Gate." Then, across the stars, new signals began to rise. Not from Karnath, but from elsewhere. Something had heard the gate stir, and now it was listening. The massive gate in Sector Null loomed in the darkness like a giant eye, silent but alive, its smooth rings pulsing faintly with a deep red glow as the human and council ships took formation around it, weapons charged, but not fired, waiting for orders that might never come, because no one truly knew what would happen next. Admiral Cortez stood on the bridge of the Dauntless, her eyes fixed on the slowly spinning structure ahead, her thoughts racing. The signals they had picked up weren't just echoes, they were organized, like a conversation between the gate and something even farther beyond. And now the pulse from the gate had grown stronger, more frequent, like a countdown. Argus confirmed it without emotion. Gate activation sequence accelerating. External command detected. Estimated time, 3 hours. The council ships wanted to retreat, saying the risk was too great, but Cortez stood firm. If we run now, we'll never have a second chance to stop them. This is where the line must hold. She knew what they were up against. The Karnath weren't just fleeing, they were being pulled. Somewhere, out there, something stronger was calling to them. And if the gate opened, the swarm would return with new strength. Maybe something worse. Commander Wren had recovered enough to lead the first defensive unit, stationed aboard the Argus Prime, a battlecruiser positioned near the gate's entrance. His team worked fast, deploying drones, mines, and sensor nets, trying to prepare for anything. "They'll come straight through that gate," he told his crew. "We won't stop all of them, but we slow them down, long enough for the rest to strike." Tension filled the system like thick fog. Council ships reinforced their hulls and rechecked shield frequencies, while Terran engineers uploaded defensive programs into the shared grid. For once, species that had never trusted each other stood side by side, because they all knew one truth: if the gate opened, none of them would be safe. Then it happened. The gate pulsed hard, sending out a shockwave of energy that rippled through space and knocked some smaller vessels off course. Lights flared along the rings, and a deep sound, like grinding stone, filled the silence. The gate was opening. Argus shouted over the comms, "Breach forming! Multiple signals detected. Contact imminent." The line of ships braced as the space within the gate twisted, and then, without warning, the swarm poured through. Karnath ships, hundreds of them, dark and fast, surged from the breach like angry bees, their weapons already firing, their engines howling like beasts. The first line of mines detonated, tearing through the leading edge, but more came behind. Wren's cruiser fired the first heavy salvo, ripping through a wave of enemies, and the rest of the fleet joined in. Beams of light crisscrossed the stars, explosions bursting like silent fireworks, but the Karnath did not stop. They kept coming, relentless, endless. Cortez issued rapid orders. Fall back to secondary formation. Pinch them in the center and crush them with overlapping fields. The plan worked, for a time. The swarm broke against the line, but then the gate pulsed again, and something new emerged. A massive ship, larger than the hive from before, with strange lines and impossible angles, as if it had been built by something that didn't see space the same way. Argus could barely scan it. Unknown class, energy readings off the scale, caution advised. It moved slowly, but with purpose, and its presence seemed to rally the swarm, who surged again with renewed fury. Wren's ship was hit, hard, shields dropping, sparks flying, but he stayed at his post, shouting commands, targeting weak spots, refusing to retreat. "This is where we hold," he growled. "They don't get past us." Council ships formed a wedge around the larger enemy craft, focusing fire, but their weapons barely scratched its surface. The thing glowed with strange light, its hull shifting like liquid metal. Cortez made a decision. "Redirect planetary defense lasers. Aim at the gate. If we can't stop the ship, we close the door behind it." It was risky. If the beam hit at the wrong time, it could destabilize the entire gate and take half the fleet with it. But there was no time for fear. The order was given, the weapons powered up. And then, just before firing, the enemy ship shifted and fired a massive pulse that cut through a council cruiser like it was paper. The fleet shuddered. Still, the beam launched. It struck the inner rim of the gate, sending a wave of energy through the structure. The gate trembled, its spin faltered, and then silence. The breach closed, sealing the opening just as more Karnath ships tried to follow. The enemy ship was left alone, cut off, but it was still there, and it was not retreating. The line had held. But the real fight was just beginning. The stars around the gate burned dim as the battle faded into silence. The space littered with drifting wrecks and glowing debris. But the giant enemy ship remained, unmoving, untouched by most weapons, a black monolith floating just beyond the edge of understanding. It gave off no signals, made no sounds, and yet every mind on every ship nearby could feel it, as if it was thinking, watching, waiting. Admiral Cortez stood on the bridge of the Dauntless, her face grim, her voice steady as she gave quiet orders to assess the damage, recover escape pods, and regroup what was left of the joint fleet. A quarter of the ships were gone. Many more were crippled. Commander Wren's vessel had survived by a miracle, though it had no working engines left, and his crew worked in silence, patching hull breaches while the strange ship floated not far away like a dark omen. Argus had been scanning the object, non-stop, but its surface defied logic, changing shape slightly when not observed, absorbing light, hiding energy signatures. "It's not just a ship," Argus said at last. "It's part of something else, something older than Karnath, maybe older than the Council itself." Suddenly the object pulsed once, releasing a wave of static across every frequency, and on every screen in the fleet, a strange signal appeared, a sound, distorted but familiar, like an old Earth transmission warped through time. It was a human voice, faint and broken, saying just 3 words. "They remember Earth." Silence followed. Cortez felt her stomach twist. "Repeat that," she said, but the message had already faded. Argus checked again. The signature was human, matching radio waves used centuries ago during Earth's early space exploration. "Impossible," one officer whispered. "That signal came from inside that ship." The theory formed quickly and spread faster than anyone could stop it. Somehow the ancient enemy, or whatever was behind the Karnath, had knowledge of Earth. Maybe they had found old probes, or maybe something worse. Maybe they had been watching all along. The tension on every bridge deepened, and Council ships debated whether to retreat and call for more reinforcements. But Cortez knew running would not help. "We close this now," she said, "before it spreads again." A plan formed, one last strike. While engineers worked to restore weapons, a stealth team would approach the object and plant a fusion core near its center, using the few data holes Argus had found in its outer shell. Wren, injured but unwilling to stand down, volunteered at once. "If it knows Earth," he said, "then it knows us, and it should fear us." The mission launched in silence. A black stealth shuttle slipped from the Dauntless, gliding through the broken field of ships and debris toward the target. The enemy ship did not react. It just floated there, as if sleeping. Inside the shuttle, Wren and 3 others moved carefully, watching every shadow, every flicker of light, until they reached the outer edge. The hull rippled like water when touched, but it let them through, pulling them inside without force. What they saw beyond the shell stopped them cold, a corridor shaped like Earth architecture, steel walls and blinking panels, almost like an old Terran station. "This isn't alien," one of them whispered. "It's copied. It's mimicking us." As they moved deeper, they passed old Earth symbols, pieces of language, images taken from history, the moon landing, ancient cities, even sounds of Earth wildlife. All twisted, remade in a way that felt wrong, like memories filtered through, something not human. Then came the core, a chamber of shifting light and gravity, where time itself felt warped. Wren set the charge and turned to leave, but a shape formed before them. It looked like a human, or at least something pretending to be one. Its voice was calm, almost kind. "We were your first echo," it said. "You left the stars open and we followed. But you closed the gate before we could answer." They didn't stay to listen. The team pulled back fast, escaping just as the charge activated. From a distance, the Dauntless watched as the enemy ship cracked, then exploded silently, its fragments vanishing into space like dust. The gate behind it stayed closed. The breach didn't reopen. For now, the line had held. But Cortez stood quietly, her eyes on the stars, knowing something terrible had looked back through time and found Earth worth remembering. They hadn't defeated it, only delayed it. And somewhere, far beyond the edge of known space, more gates might wait. But if they came again, humanity would be ready, because this time Earth would not stand alone.